If you see a question like this on the SAT math section, I know you're licking your lips. Just go over to Desmos, plug in both equations, and you're done. What was that? 10 seconds? But what happens when you see a question like this? There's no equations, no obvious numbers. So what do? That's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Here's how to solve SAT word problems on the math section. The actual secret to solving word problems is really simple. The words are there just to confuse you. In reality, they're just saying mathematical facts or equations that are way more manageable than the words look like. So, to solve word problems, you're going to need to go sentence by sentence and figure out what mathematical fact or equation that sentence is telling you. Once you have all your information, you need to use what you know to build and build until you get to your solution. I'm going to go through two practice problems to show you how that looks. Before we get into the practice problems, I do want to mention that the math may be a little more advanced than you're comfortable with right now. These are hard SAT questions, so don't worry about the math too much. What I want you to think about is how I'm going from words to numbers and equations. If you get that skill down, once you're ready with the actual math knowledge, these questions will be super simple. In our first example here, the first sentence is just telling us the form of the equation, so f of x equals negative a to the x plus b. The second sentence is just a more complicated way of saying that f of 0 minus 12 equals negative 75 over 7, because if you want to find the y-intercept of an equation, you just plug in 0 for x. And then our last sentence tells us that a times b is 320 divided by 7. If you've understood up to this point, you're perfect. This is the skill that I want you to master. Even if you can't solve this problem yet, if you're able to go from that original word problem to this point, you're in great shape. Now, I'm going to use these pieces of information and equations to build off of each other. In our second sentence, we know that f of 0 minus 12 equals negative 75 over 7, and we also know that if we plug in f of 0 into the first equation, we would get that f of 0 is negative a to the 0 plus b, which just equals b minus 1, since if you raise anything to the power of 0, it just equals 0. If we plug in b minus 1 for f of 0 back into our second equation, we can solve for b, and we get that b is equal to 16 over 7. If we plug that into our third equation, we get that a times 16 over 7 is 320 divided by 7, so a has to equal 20. In our second example here, the first sentence seems a little confusing, so let's go step by step. We know that RST is a right triangle with T as the right angle. Then we know that L is on RS and K is on ST, and LK is parallel to RT. That sounds complicated, but all that means is that LK is just going to be a straight line like this that's parallel to RT. So, you see how once we drew out the diagram, that weird first sentence makes a lot more sense? That's the key to word problems. Don't get intimidated by the words or terminology. Just get into the problem and you'll be perfect. Now we're in shallower waters. We know that RT is 72, LK is 24, and the area of RST is 792, and we have to find KT. This is a pretty simple math problem at this point. To find the area of a triangle, we multiply its base by its height and divide by 2. In triangle RST, the base is RT, which is 72, the height is ST, which I'm just going to call H in this equation, and then we divide by 2, and that's all going to equal 792. If we solve for H, we get that it's 22 units, so we know that ST is 22. Now, I'm going to use the fact that the triangles SKL and STR or RST are similar because KL is parallel to RT. So the ratio between the triangles is going to be 1 to 3 because KL is 1/3 of RT. So KS is also going to be 1/3 of ST, so KS is 22 over 3. Now, all we have to do is subtract 22 over 3 from 22 to get that KT is 44 over 3 units. Again, don't worry about that last part that was math just now. The main skill is that I want you to be able to label the diagram up to the point of the math. If you can do that, perfect. Now here's the good news. These are probably two of the hardest word problems that you'll ever see on an SAT. It only gets easier from here. Now you know that when you see a word problem, it's just trying to scare you with those words, and the math is probably a lot easier than it looks like. So when you see these on an SAT, you might not be smiling because you can't use Desmos, but I at least shouldn't see a frown.